Dear friends, welcome to this study session on Gospel according to Matthew. Throughout this session, we will undertake a brief yet meaningful exploration of the Gospel, paying particular attention to its content, themes, and message. Before turning to these aspects, however, it is important to begin with a general introduction of the Gospel, which will help us to understand the background, structure, and distinctive features of Matthew's Gospel. The Gospel according to Matthew has always been one of the most popular Gospels among Christians. One important reason for this is that it contains many of the teachings of Jesus in a well-organized way. In particular, it includes the famous Sermon on the Mount, which presents the core of Jesus' moral and spiritual teaching. Matthew's Gospel is often called the complete Gospel. It begins with the origin and the birth of Jesus and ends with the mission of the church to the whole world. In this way, it presents the full story of salvation, from the coming of Christ to the sending of the disciples. The author of the Gospel, traditionally the Gospel is attributed to Matthew, also known as Levi, who was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. According to this view, he was an eyewitness to the life and teachings of Jesus. However, modern biblical scholarship offers a more nuanced understanding. Many scholars believe that Matthew may have begun collecting the sayings of Jesus. Later, another author or editor, often called the evangelist, compiled and shaped these materials into the Gospel in its present form. The date of composition. Most scholars agree that the Gospel of Matthew was written between 80 and 90 AD. This period is important because it comes after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The Gospel reflects a time when the early church was organizing itself and defining its identity. Now, who are the first audience? Matthew addresses a mixed community of Jewish and Gentile Christians. At first, the message of Jesus was preached mainly to the Jewish people. However, over time, Gentiles were also welcomed into the Christian community. This situation is clearly reflected in the Gospel itself. There are two important mission commands. In chapter 10, Jesus tells his disciples to go only to the lost sheep of Israel. In chapter 28, after the resurrection, Jesus commands them to go and make disciples of all nations. These two commands or mission commands show the transition from a Jewish mission to a universal mission, reflecting the reality of Matthew's community. Now, the place of composition. Many scholars believe that the Gospel was written in Antioch of Syria. This city was one of the earliest and most important centers of Christianity. Antioch had a diverse population, including both Jews and Gentiles. This fits well with the mixed nature of the community addressed in Matthew's Gospel. The challenges and the questions faced by such a community are reflected in the Gospel itself. Now let us come to the literary character of the Gospel. Matthew's Gospel is carefully structured. It follows a pattern of narration and discourse. That means stories about Jesus' actions are followed by sections of his teaching. A key feature of this gospel is the presence of 5 major discourses. These are: first, Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 to 7, the Mission Discourse, chapter 10, the Parable Discourse, chapter 13, the Community Discourse, chapter 18, and finally, the Discourse on the End Times, chapters 24 to 25. These 5 discourses are significant because they reflect the 5 books attributed to Moses, also known as Pentateuch. In this way, Matthew presents Jesus as a new teacher like Moses, who gives a new law. Each discourse is followed by a narrative section. The material before the first discourse serves as an introduction, and the section after the final discourse acts as a conclusion. Now, briefly about the theology of Matthew. Matthew's Gospel contains rich theological themes. Some of them are the following. 1. The infancy narrative. The story of Jesus' birth can be seen as a gospel in miniature. It already contains many themes that will appear later, such as the fulfillment of a prophecy and the identity of Jesus. 2. Passion and resurrection. The suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus are central. These events reveal God's plan of salvation and the victory of life over death. 3. Face of Jesus. Matthew presents Jesus in many ways as Lord, Son of God, Emmanuel, means God with us, etc. Jesus is both a teacher and the Savior. 4. The face of the church. Matthew is the only gospel that uses the word church. It emphasizes community life, forgiveness, authority, and mission. 5. The importance of Peter given in the gospel. The Apostle Peter has a special role in this gospel. He is seen as a leader among the disciples and a foundation for the church. In conclusion, the Gospel of Matthew is a rich and well-structured presentation of life and teachings of Jesus. It connects the Old Testament with the New and shows how the mission of Jesus continues in the church. Because of its clear teaching, strong structure, and deep theology, Matthew remains one of the most important and widely read Gospels in the Christian tradition. Thank you for your patient listening. God bless you.